Hey guys, Scott here, and today I want to talk about two separate topics. They both kind of relate to behavior though, so I thought rather than split it into two separate videos for that sweet YouTube pennies, I would just group them all into one video right here, because they do kind of relate to each other. And the two topics I want to talk about are big data and transparency. These are two, I think, glaring issues with behavior. And if you're a behavior employee and you're watching this, obviously, who gives a fuck what I say? I'm just a dude making videos on the internet. It's totally understandable point of view to have, and that's fine. But I thought it'd be just an interesting discussion to have for just content for my channel. So don't try to draw more than I'm actually trying to put out here. It's just something to talk about. So I want to talk about there's something about having some coffee, like while you're talking about debates and subjects like that. This is making me feel like a smug asshole. I feel like I want to just go, the misdirection of their balancing team. No, I'm not gonna do that. So, big data. Big data is basically when you pull a bunch of data from a lot of different games and you make balancing decisions based off of that data. This is something that For Honor did. I don't know if you've been with me for this whole time, but I actually made a video about this in For Honor, and they did the exact same thing. And it was the main reason, not the main reason, it was a contributing reason that a lot of people kind of got fed up with the game because they kept making balancing changes in that game based off of big data rather than looking at the individual scenarios themselves. And big data is useful. Like, don't get me wrong, like looking at all the data and seeing, this killer has this win rate and this killer has this win rate. It's useful for getting your direction, aligned properly. It's good for making you notice something is off or something probably needs to be addressed. But not only is it not the sole contributing factor, it's only just it's a guy pointing towards something. That's all it is. It's not really, you don't make the decisions based off that. You look at something because of the data, and that's where big data is useful. Now, when you overuse big data, you basically remove the individual scenario and just look at the game like a spreadsheet, which it is not. And that is a huge problem that For Honor had, and it's kind of a problem that this game has too. Now, to behavior's credit, I will have to say that they don't blindly follow big data. That's impossible because then they would have buffed Nurse. Nurse has the lowest win rate in the game because obviously she's the hardest killer to play. Well, debatable, but I think she's one of the hardest killers to at least get good with or master. And because of that, her win rate is abysmal. Yet they still nerfed Nurse. They nerfed her and, removed 5 Blink and Omega Blink and things like that. And those were great changes that conflicted with big data. Most of the changes they make do seem to align with big data, but I wanted to point out a sliver of hope there because they are capable of making changes that conflict with what the data is telling them. They're able to do that. And the differentiating factor is they were able to understand themselves that Nurse is a huge problem with fucking 5 Blinks. That was stupid. It didn't take anyone more than, 20 hours in the game to realize that, hey, maybe Nurse shouldn't be able to blink 5 times in a row or blink across the entire map with like the double range. Like maybe that shouldn't be the case. And so they were able to make a change that conflicted with the data, everything that was telling them that Nurse was actually bad, because they were able to understand the individual scenario that, well, okay, the mitigating factor is she's a bit harder to play. That's why her kill rate's low, not because she's bad. And so they still made the correct change and nerfed her because even with, little experience in the game, they were able to go, okay, 5 Blinks is stupid. And that's the only mitigating circumstance there. I have full faith that they could actually make changes that were, adverse to their data if they just had the right input from people. And this is why for years and years and years, we have just been asking for them to just ask some prominent good players for feedback. You can ignore every word they say. Just at least hear what they have to say. This reminds me, I was on the Dota dev team back when it was in Warcraft 3. And IceFrog, the developer of Dota at that time for that version of the game, he kind of did this whole thing where he would have his own opinions, but then he would just ask everybody. He would ask like professionals and all the best players, hey, what are the current problems in the game? What are the main issues? And he would just get feedback from them, and he wouldn't necessarily listen to everything, but he would still get feedback from a bunch of players. So he didn't have to be a master of the game to still make great decisions that were not necessarily tied to just straight up data. It could also be because that it was Warcraft 3 and he couldn't possibly even have big data from it because he didn't work for Blizzard. It was a custom map, so you can't really extract data from it, but it still ended up resulting in one of the most balanced MOBAs ever made, at least for the 8 or 9 years that I played it. I don't know what it's like right now, but it was a really well balanced game and it was great. So I think that there's proof that listening to like a council of people that know what they're doing is just undeniably better than just solely looking at data. And I have faith that they can make amazing decisions if they just have the right perspectives from other people. That's all it is. Because if they have the right perspective themselves, then, they're not stupid. They're going to make the changes. Like, that's why they were able to change the nurse despite the data pointing otherwise, because they were able to themselves understand that nurse was, 5 blinks was just stupid. They needed to change something like that. So as long as they're capable of understanding it, then I trust them to make good changes, because I genuinely don't think they're stupid people. I think they just don't have the right input, input to give a good output, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I think that's one of the main things. I'll just say it again. I think they need a team of people that they just talk to about changes that they're going to make, what changes they need to make in the future, and just things like that. Just very simple. You don't have to contract them. I guarantee there's 100 people that will do it for free happily. I just really wish, I don't know if it's a thing of ego or stubbornness that they just won't do it, but it's kind of ridiculous that after 5 years in this game, they still don't really have any good players that they listen to. I think that's kind of silly. It really is. Some people thought that's what the Fog Whisperers were supposed to be, but that's not what they were supposed to be. Fog Whisperers have been and always have been just simply people that they like that play the game and they want to choose them to represent the game. That's it. They're not really used for balance or anything like that, even though I kind of wish that some of them were, because, even if I disagree with some of them or some of them are less experienced, probably all of them are more experienced than the devs. And that's not a dig on the devs or anything. When you develop a game, you're not necessarily supposed to be a master of your game. Very few devs do that. In fact, I would say the vast majority of devs are not good at their game because they spend time making the game, not playing it. It makes perfect sense. But that's why you have other people to talk to. So I'll just reiterate that again. I hope that someday they do that, because I think that would change a lot of people's views on the whole big data thing and make the game more balanced overall. Next, let's go over transparency. Transparency is something that Behavior does awfully, but it's not like they just are incompetent and they just decided, it's not like they're not capable of doing it. They're making a conscious decision to not be transparent with people. And I heard this from a dev in one of his streams actually yesterday. He said that the reason they don't do that is because when they try to make promises, like they have tried this in before, and when they make promises for things that they're going to add to the game and they're not able to meet those promises, then people get angry and they don't want, they don't want to deal with that, which frankly I think is a pretty shitty excuse, to be honest. Because, if you promise something to people and then you don't deliver on the promise, people are supposed to get upset. That's a normal reaction. And the fact that you're not being transparent or parent anymore because you're scared of that reaction is just really, really stupid, at least in my opinion. But the main thing I don't understand is the transparency. Like when they tried that, the transparency stopped immediately after they couldn't deliver on the thing. So they would promise something and then they couldn't deliver on it. And then people would get mad and they would just, that was the end of it. We couldn't do it. Okay, be quiet. I don't understand why they don't double down on the transparency instead of just going, oh, we couldn't do it, whatever, and just let people be mad. Why not say, here's why we couldn't do it? And I guarantee if it's a legitimate reason, if there's COVID made it so we couldn't communicate quick enough, or licensing issues, blah, 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 or console licensing, or if there's a legitimate reason that they were not able to, actually meet a promise that they made for something that they were working on, I promise the people won't get mad at you. There won't be any community outrage. And if there is community outrage, it will steer away from being mad at Behavior and will now be mad at the community for being entitled assholes. Because if there's a legitimate reason, Jesus Christ, what was happening in this game? If there's a legitimate reason, you can't realistically be mad at them. And if you are, then you're the asshole, and now we're mad at you and not the company, which is another way to get hate off of their back. However, this is a bit more of a cynical part of me. I think they don't really have good excuses. I think that's the reason they don't want to be transparent anymore. Because if they try to make the early game collapse thing, whatever they were working on, and they're not able to do it, or it takes them 5 times longer than it should, they have to either admit that A, they attempted something so gigabrain impossible that not the greatest scientist in the world could ever do it, which is not the case. B, they just simply didn't really want to work on it that much. Or C, they just don't know how to do it because they're not good enough at making games or something like that. Those are the only 3 options. So the cynical part of me kind of understands why they don't want to be transparent, because if it ends up being we just don't know how to do it, or we can't do it fast enough because we only kind of work when we want to, which is something that they've said before, then yeah, that would piss people the fuck off. So I guess just being entirely quiet is better. But I think that issue should be addressed more than the transparency. If the reason that you're not able to commit to promises is because you don't even know how to do the things you're trying to do, or you're not willing to, or you're too lazy to, or if there's not a good reason for it, that should be the issue that's addressed, not the transparency on the subject. That will just kind of come naturally. I think a company with a good conscience about the lack of changes that they're making will all just by default be transparent, because they know if they have a good reason for it, there's no reason to expect hate from anybody. But if it comes down to we don't really want to work on this right now, then yeah, you kind of deserve to get shit thrown at you. And I think that's what's happening now. Again, I don't work for Behavior though. I'm just basing this off of things that I've heard from the developers, where they say that they only work when they want to, basically, which I can't even give them shit for. This all boils down to one thing, again, because I can't blame them for doing that. They're, the phrase working smart, not hard. They're doing that. In fact, it would be stupid of them to work harder because there's no incentive for them to do it. And it all comes back to the game has no competition, so they don't have to work hard. And frankly, it would be dumb of them to work harder than they have to. So they're actually kind of being smart because they're working as much as they need to. And I think that's probably the main issue. I don't want to start making assumptions based off of the quote I heard from a couple of devs, that because I'm focusing too much on that, they only work when they want to thing. That possibly could mean many things. So I'm not going to read into that more than I should. I feel like that's unfair. So I'm not going to pretend. I don't know what's going on in their offices. The thing is, though, you don't have to be a Behavior employee. You don't have to be a professional game designer. You don't have to have vast knowledge of the industry to just make comparisons to other games. And Dead by Daylight updates slower than basically any game I've ever seen that has a, constant active online player base. There are a couple of them that I think that are tied, but they are just objectively slow, man. They're just really, really slow at changing things. And you don't have to be a professional game dev to just simply make a comparison. So I just want to get that counter argument out of the way before it inevitably happens when people come to defend them. And if you want to defend them, that's totally fine, and you're well within your right to do so. I just want to make it clear, you don't have to be associated with them to just draw comparisons to other companies. That's it. And they're a pretty big company, so they don't have that much of an excuse. But that's it, guys. I think that's pretty much all I want to talk about for now. I just want to know why they nerfed Coup de Grace. Just be transparent on that. What was going through their head when they nerfed that perk? What the fuck happened?